Welcome back to another episode of the Coordinated Chaos Podcast. I'm your host, Georgia, and I'm just your Type B bestie going deep on all things behind the scenes of building a business, women's health, and life's defining moments. A little recap on last week before we dive into today's episode. We had our first ever guest and we sat right here on this couch and I interviewed my beautiful friend Rami. It was an incredible and powerful conversation, all things grief, life-defining moments, and changing your life and the life's trajectory based on life's defining moments. She spoke about the loss of her father. She spoke about a very significant breakup in her life and the decision to leave the police force and then go all in on a mindset business last year. And I just think her story is really incredible. So if you didn't get a chance to go back and watch it yet, I really highly suggest you do so. Today's episode is going to be all things women's health, and it's just going to be a bit of an introduction to what I want to speak about in terms of women's health as we move through the course of this podcast. Women's health, to me, is a holistic approach to women's health. That could be training, it could be nutrition, it could be diving deep into women's health conditions, things like endometriosis, PCOS, which has just been changed names to polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. And we might have to get someone who is an expert on this to come in and talk more deeply on those things, but also touching on things like body image and how that affects you as you grow up, talking about things like postpartum depression or postnatal depletion, things like that, fertility, how we can support our bodies during the process of trying to conceive or as you're pregnant, because these are all things that women are unique to women. And I am very passionate about helping women make the most of their health. We run on a 28-day cycle. Most of us do anyway. It might vary a little bit. We have hormones that are fluctuating through different stages of our lives, and there are different aspects of our lives, such as our stress, our sleep, and things like that are going to affect how our hormones respond. We fluctuate constantly, not only with weight, but also with our hormones, with our moods, with our energy. We have these matriarchal roles in our lives where we're working full time and we're raising families and we're providing food, meals on the table and things like that. Like, it's just the way that society is, that we have a lot of responsibility. And I think it's really important to recognize that and validate that in women, because these are the things that are part of your lifestyle. And when we're talking about increasing your health, we have to work within our lifestyle constraints, right? But one thing that we're not very good at as well is putting ourselves first. We don't spend a lot of time thinking of ourselves. And I know as well there's a lot of talk, and I definitely sit somewhere in the middle of these two things. It's like we need to care for ourselves. We actually have to give a fuck about ourselves, and we have to have that self-care. But part of that self-care routine also needs to be that we are sometimes disciplined. Sometimes we have to follow structure. Sometimes we have to stick to our routine and build healthy habits that increase our longevity and our health and our energy, so that we can show up as the best versions of ourselves for ourselves and for others. For me, I'm obviously passionate about women's health. I have built an entire business around women's health in the way of training, nutrition, and mindset. But why? Why am I so passionate about it? Well, firstly, I'm a woman, in case you haven't already noticed. I am a woman and I have worked with a lot of women and I attract a lot of women. It's not to say that I don't care about men's health either, because I do care about the overall health of every single person on this planet. But I do believe, like I've already mentioned, we have a lot of extra responsibilities, a lot of extra pressures that always put ourselves second. And I think it's time that we started to put ourselves first and foremost, no pun intended, but also that we started, treating ourselves with respect, really. I think as a female as well, growing up in the current society, there was a lot of pressure to look a certain way and to perform a certain way and to hold it all together all the time. And I know I personally have definitely struggled with my body image over the years, especially in my younger years. I grew up as a dancer and you're in the spotlight a lot. And you have people telling you what is the way to look or feel or whatever, right? When you're in the spotlight on stage, specifically in this instance. And I think I definitely looking back, being coached by someone who was kind of judging you for the way you looked, or if you weren't the right, perfect size or height or whatever, you would be removed from the spotlight and you would be put in the back corner on the stage. Or if you just weren't quite good enough, there was a lot of pressure about being good enough and being a certain standard, even if it was a skill set that had to be learnt. You're learning a lot of this discourse. There's a lot of this conversation around whether or not you are good enough to be center front, to be in the spotlight. I think that's probably where I first really learnt or experienced a bit of that pressure around body image and just being who you are or not being enough as per se. But also going to an all-girls school was definitely something where, you are just constantly comparing, whether you like it or not, whether you're being told to or not. There are other people that are insecure around you and they're comparing to you, and then you're in turn comparing to them. And so it's this vicious cycle of just never feeling enough, really. And I think that's really, really big and very common with a lot of women. But I also lived through an era where, thigh gaps on Tumblr were the thing, when you had MySpace and you had to put your best foot forward. And now we're looking at Instagram, we're looking at TikTok, and literally have a business on there in an industry where usually, sadly, the skinnier, leaner, more pretty, less wrinkles, that beauty standard is still so predominant in today's society. And I guess having that upbringing and having enough awareness within myself to know that is kind of crazy and kind of fucked up. Look, and this is where I'm on the fence about it, because I don't want to get into the trap of being nobody needs to do anything to change themselves, because that's not entirely true. Because if you're not happy with where you're currently at, or you are in an unhealthy state, you're at risk of cardiovascular disease, heart disease, all of the things that are associated with obesity and heavier weight. If you are in those categories, yes, you should change. That's where we're at. But I think that there's just a lot of pressure on being perfect. And we could definitely get into, a whole nother side conversation about the rise of weight loss drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and they are medical weight loss. But then we could also talk about peptides, Okay, we're moving on, but you know what I'm saying. And there's just so much pressure. And I think that having that awareness of being this is actually a lot of pressure, and it's not completely normal to be stick thin, lean, stage lean, like bodybuilders and that kind of thing year round. I think that's where my main passion lies, is teaching people that when you do get into the gym, start building healthy habits and routines, and build a sustainable routine for yourself, you are doing it for health, to be and feel better, not just to look better. Like, it does actually grind my gears a little bit knowing that a lot of people are still out there punishing themselves in order for themselves to fit into a size 8 to 10 clothing. Like, we are all different shapes and sizes, and there is literally, you cannot look at someone and say, I want to be like that, because there is no way that you can replicate somebody else's body. You have different length femurs, you hold fat in different areas. That's genetic sometimes. Maybe you have a more stressful job, you're getting less sleep, maybe you have children. Like, there are so many factors that come into this that contribute to why you are a certain size and shape, that are unrelated to how much food, how much exercise you actually do. So I've gone on a bit of a tangent, I feel, but I feel responsibility to share the message that when you're doing the work and you are consistently working towards being a better version of yourself in the gym, with your nutrition habits and with the way that you perceive yourself and speak to yourself, you are doing the best that you can. And if you feel like you could dig deeper and you could do better, then that's what you need to do, right? It's just not. And you've got to also, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is holistic. You've got to look at every aspect of your life and make sure that you're doing the best to your ability in each of those things. Because I could sit here and say, be in a calorie deficit, do more exercise, but sometimes that isn't everything, because maybe you are highly stressed CEO that just does not switch off at night and you do not get any sleep at night. Maybe you are someone who has an underlying health issue related to your hormones. Maybe you have an autoimmune disease like Crohn's. Maybe you have Hashimoto's. Like, there are so many things that you could have underlying that are holding you back from getting the results you want. Yes, some people are lucky. Some people are blessed to not have any conditions as they move through their lives. I guess for me as well, I also have a history of, I guess, like I've already mentioned some of the episodes as well, as like confidence and identity sort of like struggles throughout my life. And I'd love to speak a little bit more on that. But one of the big things that I have gone through or overcome in my health journey has been emotional eating or binge eating. I never would have considered myself to have an eating disorder, and to speak on eating disorders would be outside of my scope. So that is not what I'm going to do. But I definitely have a history and a transformation, as per se, in the way that I healed my relationship with food and the tendency to lean on food as a coping mechanism, that emotional eating kind of like area, right? I definitely had times in my life where I remember going out for dinner with friends, and during the dinner we'd like order a spread of food and we'd all share and stuff. And I just like had this overwhelming feeling of like not having enough food, or like not feeling like it was enough. And I've always had a larger appetite, and having a larger appetite meant that I just like loved to eat a lot of food, volume eating. And I would leave the dinners feeling like I had been restricted, and like there is absolutely no shade on anyone that I spent time with in these times, but I remember people making comments like, oh, you eat a lot, like you've got a huge appetite, like, and those things are genuinely quite damaging. I have my coffee. Quite damaging when I look back and I think back, because it just made me feel ashamed of my appetite, of my hunger. And in the end, it did definitely lead to me being bigger than what I would like, not as lean as I would like, and having some body image issues as well. But what would happen after those times? Directly after that, I would be driving home from the dinner on Chapel Street, and I would go via Elsternwick Macca's on my way home, and I would buy a Big Mac, 6 nuggets, a large or medium Coke, and then I would also get like a sundae or a McFlurry as well with fries. And I'd eat the whole thing. And I would feel extremely unwell after that. Of course I would. And then I would hide like the rubbish packets somewhere in my car. And I just felt so ashamed of like still being hungry and still going and doing that. And of course that is overeating. Of course it's overeating. And that's going to result in me gaining more weight and putting on more weight. But at the time it was like such an obsessive, compulsive thought process that I just like had to have this stuff. And I think that I definitely had to learn to overcome that. But I think a part of it was most likely that I was not eating enough of the right foods earlier in the day, which is a very common thing with people that do have these binge sessions late at night. It's like they're either skipping breakfast or they're just not having enough protein in their meals. They're not like filling up on enough volume of the good foods, and then they're turning into a binge session at night, coming home, opening a packet of chips and then just like eating the whole bag of chips because you're so hungry. When you are doing things like this, generally it is like a sign of you not getting enough nutrients, enough energy, enough calories earlier in the day, and then your body's like, come on. But that process of it being so moreish, like foods that are highly satiable, very delicious, they're foods that are highly filling, foods that are highly palatable, delicious foods, and foods that are usually higher density in calories because they're being made with a lot of oils and fats or salts and sugars and things like that. Those foods are usually the ones that we're turning to because our body is craving energy because we haven't had enough energy as well. The second part to that as well is that it's also connected to your emotional state too. So if you're feeling sad, tired, bored, lonely, there is a chance that maybe you are coming home from a stressed day at work and then you are diving into a binge session. So those are the things that have really contributed to my story and my transformation of overcoming those things. Has been loads of things, and we'll definitely do another episode on emotional eating and binge eating and go a little bit deeper into some of the ways that I was able to overcome that. But I just wanted to share with you more of like my story and why I am so passionate about women's health. And I think now as well, like moving into a stage in my life where a lot of my friends are having children, and starting families and things like that, I've now been able to dive more into pre and postnatal nutrition and training and things like that, which has been really cool and very interesting. And I always knew that throughout the course of my lifespan and how I traveled through my life that I would move into something more like that as the time was right. And it's definitely more of the right time now. And I've been able to work with clients and women that are going through these things and be able to provide extra resources and education around those stages of life as well. And then even like at the gym too, I work with definitely a lot of the older generation of women who are now starting to move through perimenopause and menopause, and noticing the effects of that in how they show up in their energy and their mood and stuff, because it's a hormonal thing, right? Like we're shifting our hormones around all the time as we move into those stages of life, and it can definitely affect how you show up, but also has an effect on the way we metabolize things and how our bodies are responding to certain types of training, and how our bodies are recovering as well, right? So yeah, as a whole, I would say I definitely am someone who is so passionate about everything, like every aspect of health, like gut health. Like I have my own experience with gut health. I'm not entirely an expert at it, but I am currently seeking further education so that I can better help others with similar issues that have come up too. I'm a dairy-free girly, and it's definitely something, it's been a little bit around for my whole entire life, but also I noticed that it got a lot worse in probably the last 5 years. So it's interesting to take note of how it affects me in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense too. I've noticed that when I eat certain foods, my mood shifts and my energy shifts and my sleep is different and all of those things. And there is a relationship between your brain and your gut, and then your gut and your hormones as well. So it's just like this crazy loop of everything kind of being related to. And I even noticed after some time recently of not being 100% dialed on my nutrition, because I'm only human and I like to enjoy food. I love food so much. I have noticed that I have been getting a lot more sore lately after my workouts, and there is definitely a distinct connection between how sore you are and your recovery. So it's very interesting to take note of things like that. And I think that is a very big skill that a lot of people are missing, is awareness. A lot of people lack awareness of like the warning signs of what your body is doing. And it's something I've definitely raised my consciousness of a lot in the last 5 years, is like listening to when I'm feeling a certain way and taking note of like, what did I actually eat that day? What actions did I take? How was my sleep? Looking at every aspect of your health that could make up why you're feeling a certain way right now. That is like the first step to you improving your health and your well-being. So I really highly encourage people to do that. So yeah, that's definitely something that I've learned along the way, is just raising your awareness and your consciousness of like what is my body actually telling me in these moments. So I'm really excited to dive into more topics on a more specific level, and also we'll be getting some guests on to speak about certain topics that I'm not as knowledgeable about, because I think, again, I just love hearing other people's perspectives, and I am certainly a sponge when it comes to working alongside and collaborating with other allied health professionals, and I am not the expert at absolutely everything. So I've always learnt from, a hands-on approach or a conversation with an expert in certain areas. So we will definitely be diving into a lot of different topics, and also getting a lot of guests on as well in this area. But I actually have forgotten to create a prompt for you guys this time, which we normally do, but I guess maybe just off the cuff here, my prompt for you today is, when have you noticed that your body is giving you warning signs? And notice the connection between what you've either done, what you've eaten, or where you've even been. Maybe you've been in a colder, darker environment and you haven't been outside as much. You've stayed inside in the office all day and there's no windows, and you're actually feeling a bit low. Your mood is not good, right? Get outside, girl. But that's my prompt for you today, is to next time you're feeling a certain way, whether that be a physical pain symptom or like an emotional or mental symptom, take note of like, what is it that has led me here today? What is my body trying to tell me? And really use that as a tool to guide you in how you can look after yourself better and actually give a fuck about yourself, because we have one life. Like, we literally have one opportunity. Yes, we have multiple days on this life, but we just never know when that is going to be up. So why wouldn't you want to look after yourself the best that you can? That was a great off the cuff one from me. If there are any other topics that you would like me to cover, please leave a comment. Remember to follow along, subscribe, and join us for the next episode of the Coordinated Chaos podcast. Until then, I hope y'all have a great week, and we'll speak very soon.